on the 5th floor. Nils suggests they should call it a day and head back to the surface while splitting their winnings three-way as usual, which surprises Aemon that they are already leaving. Nils says they shouldn't push their luck any further. His motto is that survival is their top priority, which makes Ito wonder if he got that from Abel. Nils argues that it's only logical to prioritize their lives, and everyone agrees. Aemon then thinks that if Rio had come with them, things would have been much easier, but Ito points out that a party is usually made up of members with similar skill levels, and they're no match for him. Outside the dungeon, Rio thinks he needs to improve his skills and turn his weaknesses into strengths. He has no other choice. He also recalls Leonore's incredible speed during their fight and suspects she used wind magic to close the distance, which makes him a bit jealous. Still, he reminds himself there's no point chasing what he can't have. Instead, he should focus on what he can do. He wonders if there is a way to move quickly using water magic, and the first spell that comes to his mind is Water Jet. He remembers that he has used it underwater to surface before, but so far he hasn't used it on land, so he decides to test it. Rio creates a thick layer of ice on the ground and tries to imagine ice coming from all points in his back to propel him forward. He creates a total of 256 water jets behind him, but he isn't successful, leaving him disappointed. However, he reassures himself that it's a work in progress, and the next time he will try with over 1,000 water jets. He decides to visit the library to read more on akumas and alchemy. Meanwhile, Lynn reads through the forbidden spellbooks but can't find any information on the spells Abel said Rio could use. She thinks it's impossible to create a thick ice wall in mid-air or ice spears strong enough to pierce a wyvern's defenses. The only explanation she can think of is that they're original spells, but in her mind, only the Empire's Inferno magician is capable of creating something like that. Syrah arrives and is surprised to see Lynn there. Lynn says she was looking for something but unfortunately didn't find it. Curious, Lynn asks if she was away on a quest. Syrah replies that she went on a mission to the royal capital and tells Lynn she should go now. The envoy is waiting for her. Meanwhile, Nils struggles to talk to Nina. She comments that they came back rather quickly, so Ito explains about the archer goblins on the 5th floor. When Nina sees the magic stones, she realizes they're telling the truth and quickly rushes off to inform the guild master. She thanks them for sharing such important information. Nina informs Hugh about the recent discovery, and he notes that those monsters aren't supposed to appear until after the 10th floor, so it's a serious warning sign. He asks if there are any B-rank parties currently in town. Nina tells him that both the Crimson Sword and the White Brigade are around. Hugh asks if the brigade's main force, led by Phelps, is present. She confirms they returned from an excursion 2 days ago, so they should be in town. Hugh then tells her to summon both groups. He'll meet them in his office. A short while later, Abel hears that the White Brigade is coming too, and he's not happy about it since he doesn't know how to deal with them. But Rihia points out that he's known them for a while now, so he should understand them well enough. Lynn thinks Abel is always whining, and tells him he should learn from Warren. When they arrive at Hugh's office, they see the White Brigade is already there, and Phelps greets Abel. Abel returns the greeting with his usual response. Hugh thanks everyone and assumes Nina has already filled them in, but he repeats the key point: goblin archers have been spotted on the dungeon's 5th floor. Abel asks how reliable the information is, and Hugh says it's 100% confirmed. The adventurers who saw it brought back the magic stones as proof. Phelps then asks what they're expected to do, and Hugh explains that he wants them to enter the dungeon and check for any signs of a dungeon stampede, which refers to the explosive growth in monster population. Hugh explains that it's been 10 years since the last one, so they're likely due for another soon. Rihia believes the appearance of goblin archers on the 5th floor could be an early warning sign. Hugh then adds that they'll be paid 100 gold coins up front and 200 more upon completion. Abel asks if their only job is to confirm whether it's really happening. Hugh explains that if it is, they must immediately return to the surface so the dungeon entrance can be abandoned and double walls set up in a joint effort between the guild and the regional knights. He adds that he's already informed the local lord about the quest and shared the defense plans. Abel thinks that's a lot of preparation. Abel figures that Hugh must truly believe the dungeon stampede has already begun if he's making such detailed plans. Hugh agrees, saying it's better to be over-prepared. If it's really happening, they'll need every available force. He tells them to be ready, as they'll head out tomorrow morning. He's already actually issued a notice closing the dungeon to other adventurers. Finally, Hugh asks if they're willing to accept the quest, and both parties eagerly accept the challenge. The next morning, at the guild dorms, Rio gets ready to head out, and the others wonder where he's going so early. Rio says he's heard the Northside Library is very advanced, so he plans to study alchemy and secretly hopes to find more information about akumas. Ito mentions that only D-rank adventurers are allowed there, but Rio is already prepared for that. Ammon then wonders if the rumors are true about the library having forbidden texts. However, Ito points out that Rio needs to be B-rank to gain access, which leaves him a bit disappointed, but Nils encourages him, saying he'll qualify soon enough. The others also start getting ready to head to the dungeon and wish Rio luck before he leaves. A little while later, Rio arrives at the library. He thinks the southern one was bigger, but he likes the atmosphere here. Suddenly, he spots the elf girl he met in the city a few days ago. Meanwhile, both parties arrive at the dungeon entrance. Abel notices that the White Brigade has only half as many members, so Phelps explains they only brought C-rank adventurers or higher. When the guild master asks if they're ready to open the gate, Abel stops him. He has a bad feeling. He then tells Lynn to use her wind magic to scan the first floor. Lynn uses her magic to scan the area and sees over 100 monsters just on the first floor. They realize the dungeon stampede has already begun. Hugh immediately orders his men to alert the knights and close the city gates, as the monsters will be coming out any second now. At the guild, Nils, Ito, and Ammon notice that the dungeon is closed for the day and wonder if it's connected to yesterday's issue. Just then, a messenger arrives and announces that the dungeon stampede has begun. According to emergency protocol, all adventurers must head to the walls to help stop the monsters. Meanwhile, Rio meets the elf girl, who introduces herself as Syrah. She asks what brought him there, and Rio says he wants to study alchemy, which she finds fascinating. He explains that he hopes to create a golem, which impresses her even more since it's a very difficult task. Unfortunately, Syrah doesn't know of any books specifically about golemcraft, but she says there are some that could help him learn the basics. Syrah tells Rio to follow her and asks if he likes reading. He says he loves it but hasn't been around books in a long time. Syrah jokes that he makes it sound like it's been decades. Rio then asks if she's an elf, which she confirms, adding that she's also an adventurer in a B-rank party called Wind, though she's the only member. That reminds Rio of what Abel said about there being only one elf in town. Syrah mentions that it's unusual for an elf to live in a human settlement, but she's glad she did because it led her to meet him. She then takes Rio to the section where he might find books on golemcraft. Meanwhile, the city gates close as they try to seal off all access to the dungeon. Realizing the monsters are coming, everyone takes their positions. Suddenly, the dungeon door breaks as a horde goblins go outside. Hugh quickly orders everyone to launch long-range attacks to weaken them before they get too close. They manage to hold off the goblins just long enough for Margrave Loon's knights to arrive, which gives everyone some relief. Hugh is glad he met with Commander Neville yesterday, but even so, the number of goblins is far greater than during the last stampede 10 years ago. Hugh grows more worried as the goblins keep coming out of the dungeon, slowly wearing down the adventurers and knights. Phelps tells his team to brace for a long battle, especially since they're only facing goblins so far. Abel and his team are fully prepared. He tells Lynn to conserve her mana, but also says that if she has any powerful spell that could help turn the tide, she shouldn't hesitate to use it. They soon run out of arrows, but fortunately, other adventurers arrive with more from all the weapon stores in town. Nils tells Abel he has a message from the guild master. A bigger threat is likely on the way, and he wants the Crimson Sword to be ready to handle it. Ammon helps distribute the arrows, while Ito focuses on healing the injured adventurers. After they finally defeat most of the goblins, Hugh tells everyone it's time to descend from the wall, and they follow his order, ready to go on the offensive. Lynn uses her wind magic to help them land safely, while a girl named Shenna creates a clay wall to block off the goblins. Abel and Phelps leap over the wall and swiftly take down the goblins, showing off their superior skills. They soon come across a huge goblin and realize it's the Goblin General. Phelps thinks the battle will be over once they defeat it, but Abel notices there are 3 generals, which means the Goblin King must be nearby. Abel quickly comes up with a strategy. He and Phelps will each take on 1 goblin, while Rihia and Shenna handle the 3rd. They need to be quick so they can finish before the Goblin King shows up. They bravely face the challenge, but just as they're fighting the generals, Abel suddenly senses something and shouts for everyone to duck. A powerful air slash strikes them, and Abel realizes the Goblin King was willing to sacrifice his own generals to kill them. Watching the battle, Hugh thinks that only Abel's magic sword and Phelps's spear can defeat the king, but even with those weapons, they seem to be struggling against such a formidable opponent with so much raw power. As Phelps gets pushed back, he thinks things don't look good for them, but Abel suddenly steps in front of him and charges at the Goblin King using his perfect shadow technique. He then activates his total impalement technique and stabs the king in the chest. However, even after being pierced by the sword, the Goblin King doesn't go down, shocking everyone. Abel remarks that he didn't expect it to be that easy. Abel calls out to Lynn, and she unleashes her magic spell, Bullet Rain, which finally takes down the Goblin King. Everyone is relieved they succeeded. Phelps realizes Lynn had been preparing her ultimate move the entire time, and Abel explains that it's a powerful spell, but it requires a long incantation. Meanwhile, deeper inside the dungeon, something even more terrifying is sealed behind a door. As Rio returns to the guild, he notices the hall filled with adventurers all celebrating something, so he wonders what that's about. Meanwhile, Hugh wishes he could also drink and relax because he still has lots of paperwork to handle. He notes that on top of everything, the researchers from the royal capital will be arriving soon to conduct research on the recent incident. And although the dungeon will be closed for a month, he believes the aftermath of the attack will be much worse. A while later, Rio meets his friends, who explain the situation to him. He finally understands why they're drinking alcohol, even though it's normally not allowed in the guild. Nils excitedly tells Rio about Abel's expert swordsmanship and how he defeated the Goblin King thrusting his sword while signaling Lynn to unleash her ultimate spell. Ito adds that it was actually Bullet Rain, and it's supposed to be one of the most powerful wind spells there are. So Ito also joins the discussion by saying that only Abel was able to dodge it, but he wonders how he did that. Just then, Abel arrives, and he tells them that he used the sword skill Perfect Shadow, which is a technique for dodging any kind of ranged attack, including magic. Nils praises Abel for his heroic performance earlier, but Abel insists Nils was also great in his supporting role. Rio finds the name Perfect Shadow rather strange, and Abel had already expected him to say something like that. Their conversation is cut short by the sudden arrival of Lynn and Rihia. The girls tease Abel, saying they already expected him to be with Rio since he seems to be his favorite person, though Rio suspects they might be a bit jealous. Lynn asks Rio if he can really create ice walls in midair. He confirms he can, up to about 40 meters above the ground, which surprises her. Rio reassures her that it's not easy, it took a lot of practice. Lynn remarks that most people can't do it.